That's my little pony.
Hold on. Not even looking at you.
Eat me.
Uh-huh. Didn't you just cut your hair? It's so long. I thought you just cut it like
I trimmed it and then I got my shave redone.
Oh. Yes, I like the pony. I don't like your armpit hair.
They're not for you.
Don't like seeing it.
Just like Photoshop it out.
Yeah, yeah. In my brain.
Yeah.
Oh my god. The fucking neighbors have been like shooting off guns, and Scat was going ballistic.
What the fuck?
And now she's barking at me, coughing.
She's like, oh my god, a gun.
Hold on, let me mark where we're ending. Where was it? I was just at it. Oh my god. Whatever, it has its own mark. Longest chapter. Alright. What happened?
Oh god.
Mooching.
Yes, mooching. But I don't remember how we started.
He went to a
Oh,
mountain to
he went to a
cultivate.
mountain to cultivate. Because it's supposed to be really good. And when he got there, a bunch of low-level heavenly officials showed up and was like, you need to leave because you're tearing us down. Um, and Shellyanne was like, no. And he stood up for himself and was doing crazy things with a stick.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mooching showed up
Mm-hmm.
and he was a heavenly official.
Yeah, he went back up.
And
They were like, come on, deal with him.
yeah, and for a while Mooching just didn't do anything and he just stood there. And then Shalian, like, they said something about him robbing, and Mooching finally was like, "You need to leave." Didn't he pull out his
Well,
saber?
they already like were talking about him robbing, I think, and then that's how it started the
But
fight. And then Mooching came over, and then Chilean was like,
well, yeah,
Mooching would never agree with you guys. He's my friend. And then Mooching pulled out his saber and broke his stick. That well, they were
right.
saying to Mooching like, oh, of
They didn't.
course he won't attack him.
He
They were
didn't.
friends.
Yeah,
And then Mooching
but
was
I don't
like,
think he didn't attack until it was like right after he said again that it was robbery.
no, they were like whispering about
Was it not?
how
Oh.
Mooching like would never.
I mean, oh yeah, that was his breaking point.
It had to be
So
the
he,
moment when someone commented sarcastically, "It's understandable that Mooching doesn't want to move. He was His Highness's personal attendant back in the day, after all. Even if His Highness robs mortals and steals our spiritual land, he can't help but be affected by the sentiments of their past relationship.
yeah,
It's enough
yeah,
that he hasn't teamed up with His Highness. How can we possibly expect more than that?" And that's when he pulled out his saber. And he broke the
yeah,
stick, and he was like, "Please leave," twice.
yeah. And then he like got down, like he was on, he fell to his knees or something.
Someone
He
kicked
was just
him.
in
Someone
right.
kicked
They kicked
Chiliam
him.
down, and no one reached out a
Yeah,
hand to help him up, and he just was on the
him.
ground for a while.
And not even mooching. And then
Left.
he finally left. And as he was leaving,
He
um,
tripped and fell again.
he tripped. Yep. And then
And then
mooching
Mooching
showed
came.
up this
Yeah.
time and held out his hand, and Shalian said just didn't take it, and he stay didn't he stay down?
He didn't take the hand. He picked up a bunch of mud and started flinging it
Oh
at
right, he
Mooching.
did do that.
And
He
then in
did
his
do that.
head, he was like, "Get lost, scram!" while Mooching was trying to explain
Yeah,
himself. And then Mooching was like, "I'm
yeah,
really going this time."
yeah, and it was
So
sad.
yeah, and that ended with a humanoid figure emerging from a bunch of ghost flames.
Right.
The arrival of this man was always accompanied by a feeling of immense foreboding. When he sensed that ominous feeling, Chilian slowly lifted his head. A white-clothed man was standing about 10 paces away, amidst the countless floating phosphorescent flames. Half of the mask on his face smiled eerily. "How are you, your highness?" he greeted pleasantly. Now we're on chapter 99. In the
I'm
dark,
scared.
in the dark, Chilian's pupils instantly shrank to tiny dots. His voice quivered. "It's you?" White no face. The hairs rose on Chilian's neck. He leapt to his feet, groping for his sword. But there was nothing there, and only then did he remember that he'd pawned all of them. Even the branch he'd used as a weapon earlier had been broken. He was facing this creature without spiritual power or weapons. Years ago, when Shenla fell, White No Face had quietly disappeared. Chilian had never bothered to search for him back then, and he never considered searching for him now. He only prayed that he would remain missing and never reappear. Who could have expected that the creature would find him so suddenly? The white-clothed creature approached languidly. Cold terror filled Chilian. He couldn't help but back away a couple of steps. But then he immediately shook himself out of it. He couldn't back away. Fleeing was futile anyway. "What do you want?" he cried sharply. White No Face didn't answer, just continued to approach, with his hands clasped behind his back. Chilian was shaking from his fingers to his toes. Even the white puffs of air from his lips seemed to tremble. He forced himself to recall the jeering, the indifference, and the mocking laughter of the 30-some heavenly officials, and the sight of Mooching turning his face away. With those images in his mind, he forgot his fear and shouted as he struck out with a hand chop. However, before his strike landed, he was hit by a wave of excruciating pain. The creature had predicted Chilian's move and was a step faster, flashing behind Chilian to kick him in the back of the knee. He was too fast. Chilian dropped heavily to his knees, and for the first time, a terrifying thought entered his mind. This creature was moving faster than he could even think. The very next moment, Chilian felt something more horrifying. A freezing hand, its fingers stretched wide, was gripping the top of his head. He started screaming. The creature easily pulled Chilian's entire body up by the head. With strength like that, Chilian had no doubt his fingers would easily crush his skull should he curl them inward, turning his head into a pulp of bloody flesh mashed between bone. He had also had no doubt that White No Face planned to do exactly that. Chilian drew sharp, erratic breaths, thinking he was dead for sure, and squeezed his eyes shut. Yet unexpectedly, the creature seemed like he wasn't planning on exerting any more force, and instead he withdrew his murderous intent with a soft sigh. For a long time after that soft sound, the creature stayed perfectly still. Surrounded by the dead silence, Chilian reopened his eyes little by little. Ghost fires filled the air, dancing in wild joy. Each ball of flame was a spirit of the deceased cackling in uproarious laughter as they watched the show. However, most of the ghost fires did not dare to approach them. They appeared to have been cowed by something. But one ball of ghost fire, blazing abnormally brightly, was hanging above the two of them, using its flames to crash against the creature behind him again and again. It was impossible to tell exactly what it was trying to do, but for all the effect it was having, it might as well have been an insect fighting a tree. And then, Chilian abruptly froze. White No Face was hugging him. As Chilian tilted and fell to his knees in a slump, he had been captured by a pair of cold, powerful arms that pulled him into a lifeless embrace. At some point, White No Face had sat down on the ground with him. "So sad," he murmured. "Your Highness, look at what they've done to you." he whispered softly as he stroked Shilian's head, his hands gentle and full of pity. It was like he was petting a wounded puppy, or his own gravely ill child on the brink of death. The smiling half of the crying smiling mask was hidden in the darkness. The moonlight revealed only the half that was crying, looking like genuine tears of grief shed for Shilian. Shilian remained stiff and curled in on himself, moving no further. The man in white behind him raised his fingers to wipe the filthy mud from Shilian's face. He sensed a peculiar kind of loving compassion in the man's touch, like the embrace of a close friend or a dear family member. It miraculously returned a bit of warmth to Shilian's shivering body. He never expected that this sinister creature would be the one to finally offer him compassion. Choked sobs escaped from the depths of Shilian's throat, and he trembled harder and harder. The ball of ghost fire flew near to his heart, but didn't press close. It was like it wanted to warm him, but wasn't confident that it could help chase away the cold. White No Face helped wipe Shilian clean of mud. "Come to my side," he beckoned. Shilian's voice trembled. I... Instead of finishing his sentence, his hand flashed out and went straight for White No Face's mask. His attack was successful and smacked the mask high into the air. Shilian leapt to his feet and flipped meters away, his earlier terror now completely absent. "Who would ever go to your side? You... monster!" he raged in a dark voice. The ghastly, pale, crying, smiling mask fell to the ground, and all the ghost fires in the air seemed shocked. They abruptly lost all semblance of order, dancing in a frenzy without pause, shrieking without sound. White No Face, on the other hand, covered his face and started chuckling softly. The laugh made Shilian's hair stand on end. "What are you laughing about?" White No Face humphed softly. "You will come to my side one day," he stated with certainty. Shilian didn't understand what he meant, and said in disbelief, "What even is your side? You destroyed Shenle, but you still want me to go to you? Are you crazy? I think you're insane." Shilian had never learned to cuss. Even in extreme rage, only those mild denouncements burst out of him. But if he had, he would have used the world's most vicious, most vengeful words to curse that creature. White No Face laughed out loud, and he held his head high as he covered his unmasked face with his hand. "You will come. No one in this world will ever truly understand you, and no one will stay by your side forever. Except me." Shilian was frightened, but he still tried to argue. "Get out of here! Enough with your self-righteous nonsense. That isn't true just because you say so." One ball of ghost fire flew to his side and moved up and down like it was nodding in agreement. However, Shilian was surrounded by wicked wisps just like it, so Shilian didn't notice that particular one. "Oh, is there someone?" White No Face asked amiably. "Maybe there were people like that in your past, but do you really think they'll be with you much longer?" "What do you mean? What are you hinting at?" Shilian demanded. White No Face didn't answer. He only sneered and turned around like he was about to drift away. "I will wait for you here, your highness," he said softly. As if Shilian would let him go so easily. "Wait! Don't go! What did you do to them? Did you do something to my parents and Feng Xin?" He chased after the white-clothed man, reaching out to grab at him. Yet unexpectedly the man snatched a ball of ghost fire with a light sweep of his sleeve. The motion wasn't intended as an attack, but Shilian sensed a horrifying force coming at him, and he was thrown high into the air, landing hard by slamming against a tree. With a loud crack, the giant, thick-trunked tree split and fell from the force of the collision. In the past, Shilian wouldn't have even batted an eye at crashing into and shattering 10 trees, but he was mortal right now, and the impact made him feel like all of the bones in his body were crumbling. He fell heavily to the ground and lost consciousness. The final moment before his eyes closed, Shilian saw the white-clothed figure's hands. A ball of ghost fire blazed in his palm. White No Face chuckled. "Spirit, tell me, what is your name?" "How very interesting." When Shilian regained consciousness, everything was gone. His chest and mouth were steeped in the thick, astringent tang of blood. His head spun for a good while before he suddenly jolted and attempted to crawl to his feet. "Father! Mother! Feng Shin!" he muttered. He had remembered something. He remembered everything that had happened before he passed out, and didn't dare to waste a single second. He ran frantically for dozens of kilometers, until finally he made it back to their hideout in the deep of the night, 20-some days after he left with a satchel on his back. Shellian was torn with panic and anxiety the entire way, scared that White No-Face had already murdered his friend and family. He slammed the door open the moment he arrived at the dilapidated cottage. "Father! Mother! Feng Shin!" he blurted before even catching his breath. Thank goodness. The house didn't look as wretched as he had dreaded. There was nothing out of place either. It still looked exactly the same as when he had left. Shellian had been frantically running for a long distance with a battered body. His throat was so dry that he thought it might start smoking. He relaxed a little, then swallowed and continued deeper into the house. "Feng Shin, where are you guys?" He pushed a door open, and his voice died in his throat. Let me drink. What could be happening? Feng Shin was inside, and when he saw Shellian had returned, he exclaimed in amazement, "Your Highness, why are you back?" However, Shellian wasn't looking at him. He was staring intently at the one facing Feng Shin. A black-clad man stood there. It was Mu Ching. Mu Ching turned his head and saw Shellian. He pressed his lips together, looking grim. Feng Shin went around him and came over to greet Shellian. "Didn't you go train? How was it? I thought you'd be gone for several months, at least. Did you come back so soon because you made good progress?" Shellian stared at Mu Ching. "Where are mother and father?" "Sleeping in their room. They've already gone to bed," Feng Shin said. "Why are your clothes so dirty? What's with the cuts on your face? Who'd you fight?" Shellian didn't answer. Only when he heard his parents were fine did he completely relax, and he turned to Mu Ching. "Why are you here?" Mu Ching didn't speak, so Feng Shin replied on his behalf. "He came to deliver some stuff." "What stuff?" Shellian questioned. Mu Ching raised his hand slightly and pointed to the side, where there were several large, clean sacks of what probably contained rice or grain. Seeing Shellian so quiet, Mu Ching said softly, "I heard you needed medicine. I'll think of a way to get some later." "Sounds good," Feng Shin said. "I'll give my thanks then. We do need all that stuff right now." Oh my god, Scout barking. "Heavenly officials can't give mortals private gifts, so you be careful too." Then he shuffled over to Shellian's side and whispered, "I'm pretty surprised he actually came back to help. I'm the one who judged him wrong. In any case—" "Don't need it," Shellian interrupted. Mu Ching's expression turned ashen for a moment, and he clenched his fists. Feng Shin was puzzled. "What don't we need?" "I don't need your help," Shellian said, each word slowly and clearly. "I also don't want any of your stuff. Please leave." You're like stuttering. You're
You
you
know
there?
why?
Oh my god.
Am I stuttering?
Yeah, your voice is also stuttering.
Right back. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're better now.
I don't know what that was.
Could you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was just me.
When he heard the words, please leave, Mooching's face got even more glum. Now, Function noticed that something was wrong. Just what is going on? Mooching bowed his head. I'm sorry. They'd known Mooching for so many years, but this was the first time they ever heard him say those words. It was also his first genuine apology. But there was no more room in Shilian's mind for surprise. Please leave! With that, he lost his temper and started throwing the sacks at Mooching. White rice spilled across the ground and made a mess of Mooching. Nonetheless, the black-clad man only raised an arm to block and held back from making any further move. Startled, Function held Shilian down. Your Highness, what's going on? What did he do? Didn't you leave to cultivate? What happened out there? As he was held down, Shilian said with red eyes, Why don't you ask him? I did go to train, but why don't you ask him why I've returned? Their argument was too noisy, and the queen was startled awake in her room. She emerged after pulling on an outer robe. My son, you've returned? What happened to you? Nothing, Function quickly reassured her. Your Majesty, please go back inside. He forcibly pushed her back into her room and closed the door. Then he demanded, What did you do? Mooching, what did you do? Your Highness, did the cuts on your face come from him? Shilian's breathing was growing increasingly frantic and erratic, and he couldn't utter a single word. It wasn't me, Mooching exclaimed. I didn't hit His Highness. I only asked him to leave. Other than that, I didn't say anything harsh, and I didn't move against him. They were determined to take over that spiritual land, and it would have kept escalating if you didn't leave. You! With just those few words, Function got the gist of what had transpired. His eyes widened, and he pointed at Mooching, unable to speak. A moment later, he bent down and grabbed a sack, then flung it at Mooching. Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out! Mooching was once again hit in the face by the sacks of rice he had brought, and backed 2 steps away. All 3 of them were panting harshly. I was wondering why you would suddenly had a change of heart, Function cried. I can't fucking believe this. Holy shit! Don't let me see you ever again! Yes, I was wrong, I admit it, and I apologize, Mooching exclaimed with a cracked voice. But I wanted to solve our current problems before considering anything else. Your parents and my mother, the 3 of us, who knows how long we would have had to struggle in this quagmire. But I thought that if I went back first, maybe we'd still have a chance. All fucking bullshit. Enough with your bullshit, Function cussed. No one wants to hear your excuses. Get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. Mooching tried again. If you put yourself in my shoes... Function cut him off. I told you I've had enough of your bullshit. I'm not listening. I just know that even in your shoes, I wouldn't have done what you did. No need to put myself in your shoes, because you're nothing more than a traitor. Mooching looked angry now, and he took a step forward. When His Highness was in a tight spot, wasn't he forced to commit robbery? So why can't you accept hardship as an excuse when it comes to me? Function sputtered. Huh? Robbery? Who committed robbery? His Highness robbed someone? What crap are you fucking saying? Shilian stopped breathing. Watching Function's rage gradually turn to shock, Mooching finally realized something wasn't right, and he hesitantly turned to Shilian. You didn't... It had never occurred to him that Shilian hadn't told Function about what happened. Ah! Shilian went mad and grabbed a random object to chase Mooching away. Mooching realized that he seriously screwed up and didn't dare to speak, even after Shilian hit him multiple times. Yet when he looked back, the thing Shilian was using to chase him out of the door was a broom. His face instantly darkened. Do you have to taunt me like this? Get out of here, Shilian cried brokenly. Sharp gales blew from the force of Shilian's punch. Mooching dodged the brunt of the attack, but only barely, and he still received a thin, bloody cut on his cheek. He touched the wound, then looked at the blood on his hand, with an unreadable expression on his face. Fine. I'm leaving. Shilian was doubled over, racked with shivers from head to toe. Mooching took a few steps forward, and placed the rice sacks back down on the ground. I'm really leaving. Shilian's head shut up. When Mooching saw the look in Shilian's eyes, he swallowed and didn't linger any longer, leaving with a sweep of his sleeves. Only then did the thoroughly stunned Function come running outside. Your Highness! He's bullshitting, right? What robbery? Shilian covered his forehead. Don't ask me any more. Please, Function. I beg you, please don't ask any more." "No, of course I don't believe it," Function said. "I just want to know what really happened." Shilian screamed and covered his ears, fleeing back inside the cottage and locking himself in his room. Function was genuinely convinced that he would never do such a thing, but that was precisely why this was the worst-case scenario. Shilian wanted to just run away, to escape to a place where no one knew him. But when he remembered that White No-Face had said, he didn't dare go too far. He could only shut himself inside his room. No matter how Function and the Queen called for him, he refused to emerge. It took 2 days for Shilian to feel calmer, and next time Function knocked, he silently opened the door. Function stood there holding a plate. "Her Majesty made you this earlier today and wanted me to bring it to you." The things on the plate were green and purple. It was a terrifying sight. "Your Highness, if you're scared for your life, I can eat it for you," Function continued. "I won't tell Her Majesty." Shilian could tell that Function still really wanted to prod and ask about the robbery, but he was also scared that Shilian might lock himself up again. He had forced his curiosity down and pretended not to care, like the incident had never happened and there was nothing to question to begin with. However, he wasn't good at joking, and his failed attempt at comedy only made things even more awkward. The taste of his mother's cooking was honestly terrifying to the extreme. The more times she entered the kitchen, and the more effort she put in, the more she progressed down the wrong path. Shilian had never cooked in the past either, but the meals he made, now, didn't taste too bad. The only explanation was natural talent. Nevertheless, Shilian took the plate, and sat at the table dutifully to eat. He couldn't waste anything he ate anymore, either way. There was one silver lining. He was sure the king had overheard their argument a few nights prior, and Shilian had thought he was done for. But based on how things had gone after the past few days, it looked like the king and queen still weren't aware of the robbery incident. Otherwise, considering the king's temperament, he would have bawled Shilian out already. He knew Feng Shen would never tell them about it, so Shilian could relax for now. As he was thinking, Feng Shen abruptly rose to his feet, and Shilian snapped out of it. "What are you doing?" Feng Shen grabbed his bow. "It's time for me to go busking." Shilian stood up. "I'll go with you." After a moment of hesitation, Feng Shen said, "Nah, you best rest some more." Although Feng Shen didn't ask any more questions, Shilian still felt miserable all over. Now that Feng Shen had heard about what he'd done, he kept feeling like something between them had changed, and that they could never return to the way that they had once been. Every word and look Feng Shen gave him seemed to take on a different meaning, worthy of deeper interpretation. Shilian shook his head and sighed. "I'll be honest with you. I don't have the mind to cultivate right now." Feng Shen had more or less expected this and bowed his head, not knowing what to say. "Since that's the case, instead of rotting inside the house, I might as well go busk too," Shilian continued. "That way I can earn us some money, so at least I'm not—" At least he wouldn't be an invalid, he meant to say. Yet for some reason he couldn't bring himself to speak the word. Perhaps it was because he already felt like an invalid, so he didn't dare to say it so casually. Feng Shen was still a little worried. "I'll be fine on my own too. Your Highness, you've only had one meal over the past 2 days, so why don't you rest a while longer?" The more he insisted, the more anxious Shilian was to prove himself, and he turned to look in the mirror. It's fine, I'll just clean myself up and—" He'd planned to tidy himself up, so he at least wouldn't look like a disheveled, crazy beggar. But when he looked in the mirror, a horrifying image was reflected back. The him in the mirror didn't have a face. That was because his reflection was wearing a half-crying, half-smiling mask. Shilian screamed, and Feng Shen jumped in surprise. "What? What is it?" Shilian pointed at the mirror, his face pale. "Him! My... Feng Shen followed his pointing finger and looked at the mirror. A long moment later, he turned to look at Shilian again, bewildered. "What's with you?" Shilian was terrified to the marrow. He gripped Feng Shen hard, only squeezing out a few words with great difficulty. My face! Don't you see it? The thing on my face!" Feng Shen stared at him and sighed. Shilian was still confused why he hadn't reacted when Feng Shen said, "Your Highness, have you finally noticed the cuts on your face?" It was like Shilian had been plunged into an icy cellar. Why? How could this be? Why would Feng Shen say that? Did this mean that Function couldn't see the mask on his face in the mirror? You don't see it? There's something on my face, Shillian blurted. Function was puzzled. What thing? What do you mean? I don't see anything. Shillian looked in the mirror again. That's impossible, But when he looked again, the mask on his reflection's face had disappeared. Only his own panicked expression looked back at him. There were bruises and crisscrossing cuts all over his face. He looked beside himself with fear and wretched to the extreme, like a laborer who had been beaten to a pulp by their landlord. Shillian was stunned in spite of himself, and probed the side of his cheek as he wondered, "Is this me?" Just then he heard Function speak. "Your Highness, are you a bit overtired, perhaps? Or are you just exhausted from being angry at that stinkin' bastard? Listen to me. Don't go out for the next few days. Just take it easy." Shillian finally snapped out of it and saw that Function was about to leave, his bow slung on his back and a stool dangling from his hand. "No!" Shillian exclaimed hastily. Function pushed the door open and looked back. "Is there something else?" Although the words almost made it to his lips, Shillian forcefully swallowed them, because a strange thought had appeared in his mind. Their life was already very difficult. If he told Function that White No-Face could be coming back to harass them, what would he do? Function had also been traumatized by White No-Face. Would he distance himself from Shillian and leave like Mu Ching? While Shillian's imagination ran wild, Function left. Shillian snapped back to reality at the sound of the door closing, but he could only shrink back to bed and wrap himself in blankets to take another nap. Suddenly, he smelled something foul. Shillian crawled upright. At first he thought it was the Queen cooking again, or that some rat had died in the corner, and he got up to check. He looked everywhere, but eventually he discovered that the source of this foul smell was actually himself. Only then did Shillian remember that it had been over 2 weeks since he'd last washed up or changed clothes. Of course he smelled. Shillian held his breath. A wave of self-hatred crashed over him. Just thinking about how his parents and Function surely must have noticed but hadn't bothered to tell him made him feel another wave of mortification. He sneakily opened the door and looked around. Seeing there was no one outside, he found himself a fresh set of clothing and got to work heating some water for a bath. After much struggle, he finally lowered himself into the bathtub. He sank beneath the water's surface and held his breath until he was drowning, only resurfacing when he felt he was going to pass out. Then he scrubbed his face roughly a few times. After he finished scrubbing himself down, Shillian reached out to grab for his clothes. He shook out the robes absent-mindedly and was about to get out of the water and pull them on, when he suddenly noticed something. These weren't his clothes. This was White No-Face's ghastly white funeral garb, expansive sleeves and all. In an instant, Shillian felt the hot water he was soaking in turn to an icy pond. His hair stood on end, and he cried out in dismay. Who did this? Who had swapped out his clothes in secret while he wasn't paying attention? He jumped out, still wet and dripping, and knocked the bathtub over with a loud splash. The entire cottage was flooded in an instant with bathwater, startling the king and queen in the next room. The queen supported the king as they walked out to sea, only to find Shillian sprawled naked on the flooded floor. In her shock, the queen came rushing forward to hug him. "My son, what happened to you?" Shillian was wet and dripping, his hair strewn around him. He looked up and hugged her back. "Mom, a ghost! There's a ghost! There's a ghost clinging to me! He's followed me everywhere!" He looked no different from someone who had lost his mind, and the queen couldn't take it any more. She wept in anguish and held her son. The king also watched Shillian in shock. Although he was a man of only 40-some years of age, he now looked like he was over 60. The frigid air of winter jolted Shillian, and he pointed. "The clothes! Look at the clothes!" But then, when he looked at the clothes again, he didn't see the funeral garb at all. Those were his normal white cultivation robes. Rage seized Shillian, and he slammed a fist against the wooden tub. "Just what do you want?" he roared. "Why are you toying with me?" The queen forced back her tears and hugged him again. "My son, don't be angry. Just put on some clothes first. Put them on. Don't catch a cold." That day, Function came back very late. Exhaustion was written on his face, much more than usual. Shillian had been waiting for him for a long time, and he said impatiently, "Function, I have something very important to tell you." White No-Face was too strange and too powerful a creature. Even if Shillian told Function about him, any warnings made ahead of time would probably be pointless. Nevertheless, after much thinking, Shillian still believed he shouldn't keep something like this a secret from Function. He decided to tell him the truth. Unexpectedly, Function didn't ask him what it was, and only said, "Oh, good. I've got something I wanted to say to you, too." Shulian assumed the matter with White No-Faced would be most critical, and important things were best talked of last. So he sat down at the table and asked, "You go first. What is it?" Function hesitated for a moment, but said, "Your Highness, you go first." Shulian didn't dare to decline politely any more. "Function, you must be extremely careful. White No-Face has returned," he said in a hushed voice. Function's expression abruptly changed. "White No-Face is back? Why would you say that? You saw him?" "Yes," Shulian exclaimed. "I saw him." Function paled. That's not right. Why would he let you see him? Why are you still here in one piece?" Shulian buried his face in his hands. "I don't know. Not only did he not kill me, he had even hugged him and patted his head like a loving elder. He beckoned him to his side." After listening to Shulian describe the strange encounters from the past few days, Function's shock gradually faded away and was replaced by confusion. What exactly does he want? "It can't be anything good. He also seems to be following me everywhere," Shulian said. "In any case, you just have to be careful. Help me remind Father and Mother to be careful too, but don't frighten them." "All right," Function said. "I won't leave for the next few days. The stuff that bastard gave us should last for a while." It was quite embarrassing to admit. When Mooching went away, he left behind everything he brought with him. Although Shulian had lost control of himself, flung the provisions in Mooching's face, and declared that he didn't need his stuff nor his help, they still picked up everything in defeat once they calmed down. Shulian sighed and nodded. Then he said, "Oh yes, what was it you wanted to say to me?" Now that the subject was raised, Function hesitated again. After a pause, he opened his mouth, hemming and hawing and scratching at his head as he stammered out, "Actually, it's... Your Highness, do you still have any money on you, or something that can be pawned?" Shulian was perplexed that he'd ask such a foolish question at a time like this. "Huh? Why do you ask?" Function was sweating, but he replied boldly, "It's nothing. Just, if you happen to have some, can you lend it to me?" Shulian laughed bitterly. "Do you really think I have anything?" Function sighed. "I didn't think so." After giving it some thought, Shulian asked, "Didn't I give you that golden belt?" "That's not enough," Function mumbled. "Far from it." Shulian was shocked. "Function, what exactly did you do? How could a golden belt not be enough to cover whatever you need? Did you beat someone up and need to pay them off? Tell me." Function came back to himself and quickly said, "Oh no, don't take this to heart. I was only asking." Shulian pressed him over and over, but Function still swore everything was fine. Finally, Shulian said with worry, "Well, if there's anything you must tell me, we can think of a... If there's anything you must tell me, we can think of a solution together." "Don't worry about me," Function said. "There's no way a solution will just fall from the sky. Your Highness, you just focus on solving your own problems." When he mentioned that topic, Shulian's heart sank again. And that's where we'll stop. Next bit is set up for 100.
Boy. I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm scared now. Like, I'm not happy.
Yeah,
I'm
this is where it starts to get really
depressed.
sad. Like he's so like fucked up and he
He's
doesn't even
so
shower and he's
depressed.
like all self-hatred and then he fights
Yeah,
Mooching when he's never fought his subordinates before. And Mooching
dude.
actually apologized and oh, it makes me feel so much.
It's fucked up.
It was fucked up.
Dude, he's Jesus Christ.
He is Jesus Christ. He's like, I'll take all the pain so that you guys like he was like I can't even tell Function because Function has PTSD.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, buddy, you also have PTSD. What he's balancing on your crazy boy. Oh, he's twerking. Oh, his head is so round. Oh, oh,
I shocked him.
he got fucking zapped. He's gonna leap down. He's gonna leave. Turn around. I can't hear him. It's so sad. His pouch. Oh, oh, oh.
Oh,
Okay.